Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Steve Radelet to our conversation series. Professor Radelet is our Donald F. McHenry Chair in Global Human Development, a distinguished professor of the practice and director of the Global Human Development Program in our School of Foreign Service. So Steve, thank you so much for joining us, and let's get started.
Great, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Your expertise is in the field of global human development, including research around economic growth, foreign aid, debt, financial crises, with a focus on the continents of Africa and Asia. Can you share with us a little bit about how you came to focus this way in your work? What experiences influenced your passion and your understanding of these issues?
Well, thanks. It's a great question. And it really, I didn't start out thinking that I was going to be working in international development. I went through my undergraduate work. I was going to be a high school math teacher and a track coach, which I actually did for several years outside of Boston. But my wife had a family with a lot of experience in international programs, and her grandparents and her aunt had been in the Peace Corps. So we decided to get married and quit our jobs and run off and join the Peace Corps. So we lived in Western Samoa in the South Pacific for 2 years. And I was teaching math and science, and my wife was teaching everything else, actually, English and history and everything else. And I was struck in living in this tiny village in the middle of this small island in the middle of the Pacific, these people living in poverty, with the question of why? What is it? What is it that in my family, my society, my country has allowed us to live at higher standards of living? And what is the issue? What are the constraints here for people in this village? And it wasn't because they were lazy, and it wasn't because they were stupid, and it wasn't because of any kind of inherent differences in us. It just really struck me then that it was about a lack of opportunity, that they didn't have the same opportunities that I had had, and they hadn't had the ways to improve their skills and to take advantage of those opportunities, whether those are educational opportunities or business or whatever it was. And that has become kind of my life question of what is it? What is it that explains the differences between these societies? And if it is about opportunities and skills, what can be done by the people of those communities themselves, and what can we do as a broader global community to provide them with the means of creating those opportunities and the skills to take advantage of those opportunities? So that's when it started, and it's been a long journey since then, working there. After I did my master's degree, and between my master's and PhD, we moved to West Africa, which was the beginning of my work in Africa. Spent 2 years in the Gambia working on debt relief and financial issues in the Ministry of Finance there. I went back and did my PhD at Harvard, and then moved to Indonesia, where we spent 4 years working in Jakarta. Again, I was working for the Ministry of Finance on financial issues. So those were the roots of my Africa-Asia connections, and kind of took it from there.
Well, as you just have described, working in Malawi, Indonesia, Gambia, but you've also served as an economic advisor to former president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Well, what was it like advising President Sirleaf? Can you talk about the context of what Liberia?
I can. You know, my greatest fun is literally, and we'll talk more about this, I hope, is teaching at Georgetown. I really do love teaching, because I was a high school math teacher, so I started as a teacher. But my greatest honor, honestly, it was to work for President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She's pretty amazing as an individual person. She's an astonishing leader, and she took over in early 2006 as the country was just recovering from a long and very, very destructive and bloody civil war. And she needed help on a variety of things. The first thing she asked me to do was help with debt relief. I had worked in the US Treasury on debt relief. I had worked in the Gambia on debt relief. I had some experience of the deep bureaucracy of how to figure out what Treasury would do, what the IMF would do, what the World Bank would do. And she knew that. And actually, with the help of Steve Cashin, who you know well and is on the Board of Visitors at the School of Foreign Service, who was a good friend of hers. He was the connection. and suggested to her that I might be helpful. And so I started going out there actually in late 2005 and continued doing so through her 12 years in office, working on debt relief, working on economic growth strategies, working on financing, helping her manage foreign aid. And it was just really rewarding to work with her and to work with the people of Liberia as they grappled with the situation they faced and took charge of it themselves, of how to rebuild and what they could do themselves, but what they needed assistance from the rest of the world to do on a whole range of political and economic issues. And the war is now far behind, and it's been a long time now since there was any conflict, and hopefully that will be permanently left behind, and they're on some much more solid footing going forward. But it was a real challenge because nothing was there. The roads had been destroyed, the infrastructure had been destroyed, everything had been destroyed. But a side benefit of this for Georgetown is that she has been able to visit many times. I know you have met with her, but we've met with her several times at the School of Foreign Service. And one of the great advantages of this relationship was last May, as we were in the midst of our COVID problems and going everything virtual, and we were trying to figure out how to do a commencement ceremony for our global human development students. President Sirleaf agreed to speak from her home in Monrovia and give a talk to my students on their graduation day. And it's one of those things that had we been in person, she never would have been able to come and speak to our students, but because we were all virtual, she was able to do that. And I think it was a real highlight for the students. So I loved working for her. I learned so much from her, and I benefited so much from my relationship with the people of Liberia and learned so much. And I think our students have learned from that relationship as well.
Let's connect a couple of dots. You've
Okay.
served in several roles over the year in the United States as chief economist of USAID, as a senior advisor for development for Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, deputy assistant secretary of the Treasury. How does your time in these roles and your experiences addressing issues on the world stage inform your scholarship and teaching?
Yeah, it's a good question. As I tell my students, that just means that I can't keep a job. So I want to thank you actually for keeping me around Georgetown for so many years. No, I moved from things that I've had this great, just a wonderful opportunity really to do three different things: to work in academia, teach and research, to work for my own government of the United States, for the US Treasury, for the State Department, and for USAID. And then to work for other governments, to work for the government of Indonesia, for the government of the Gambia, for the government of Liberia, for the government of Malawi. And so to wrestle with these problems of poverty and global human development from these three perspectives. And each one informs the other, I think. And people, there are a lot of wonderful people who stick with one of those tracks and they do great things. But for me, each has really informed the other. And my scholarship and teaching just would not be nearly as practical and as hands-on and as informed by real-world evidence if I had not spent those years myself working for other governments, but then also those years working for the US government, where I learned the perspective of when the US engages as a government, the importance of really reflecting the priorities and the desires of the people of the United States and their tax dollars, and how to balance that with, of course, the needs and desires and priorities of people on the ground in developing countries is really one of the most challenging aspects of working in this field. And it's just been a great benefit to me personally to be able to work in these three different perspectives and how each one informs the other. And I think at a place like the School of Foreign Service, it's perfect because that's where those things all come together. Some of our faculty do great theoretical work, but so many of them are just very practically involved with solving real world problems. And to do that, you've got to know who the actors are and what their perspectives are, what their priorities are, so that we can solve real problems.
Sure. Now, as I shared a moment ago, you serve as director of the Global Human Development Program in our School of Foreign Service. Can you talk about the program, its mission, the unique opportunities it provides our students interested in development, the ways that you bring together coursework and field work to prepare our students?
I'd be happy to. I love talking about this program and about our students. So the program started in the fall of 2012. Our first group graduated in May of 2014. So we're a fairly new program. It was really the brainchild, as you know well, of our former dean, Carol Lancaster, working with you and many others around the faculty, and her vision has been carried on so well by our current dean, Joel Hellman. But the idea is to have a practitioner-oriented program of people solving the big issues around global human development. We bring in 30 students a year in each cohort. So we have 60 students over the 2-year program, and that size is intentional because we focus on the academics for sure, but we really focus on the cohort and learning from each other. We bring in people who have several years of experience so they can share that experience with each other. We bring in many students from around the world, students from Sub-Saharan Africa, from South Asia, from Latin America, from East Asia, from Eastern Europe. We bring in people from all around the world, bring them to Washington, D.C., where they can learn from each other in a way that most other cities can't do that. In the neighborhood of places like the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank and USAID, the State Department, the IMF, and so many places like Mercy Corps and Save the Children that have offices right here in Washington, and bring them together. So the core of our program is the students and the experiences that they have and the personal motivations they have. We start with that, and then it's a great program where we give them a core curriculum for everyone in economics, in quantitative methods, in the political economy of development, and in management and managing and designing programs, and then give them the space through their electives to then specialize in humanitarian response or working with refugees or working at the intersection of business and development and entrepreneurship or education and development or climate change and development. So we give them all this solid core on the big pictures and then allow them to specialize in the areas of their particular interest. And so we're having a great time. We love the students. They're all doing great things now. Those that have graduated, working for international NGOs or working for their own government, their home government, for those from developing countries, or local NGOs, or for the World Bank, and a variety of other places around the world, many in private business, working at the intersection of business and development. So it's a lot of fun. So,
and as you think about how to prepare future leaders for the work in this field, what issues in global human development are you most focused on in this current moment?
Yeah, so we focus on a range of issues. For me, especially right now, the issues are around vulnerability and around equipping people with the resources they need to be more resilient in a changing world. And you know, with what has happened over the last year and a half, it reminds me that we can't be too focused on the issue of the day because we don't know what the issue of tomorrow is going to be. We wouldn't have known 2 years ago that there was going to be a global pandemic. So we're trying to focus on the broader issues of how we can help individual people, their families, their communities, and their societies become more resilient. And so a lot of that is about how you localize efforts, build the capacity of people in the communities themselves, work with them, learn from them because they have the leadership and the knowledge of what goes on. And if any program or idea or project is going to be sustained, it's going to be the local community members that do that. So we try to focus on that kind of approach. And then, of course, build the skills in a variety of issues. Poverty reduction remains really at the top of the list because we still have upwards of 600 million people around the world that live on less than $2 a day, which is inexcusable. And that number is going up in the midst of the pandemic. Obviously, there are big health concerns. For me, the two biggest concerns on the horizon affecting the world's poorest societies are, number one, climate change and the impact that will have on the most vulnerable people. Because you know, the people who did the least to cause this problem and have just begun to make a little bit of progress are the ones that are most vulnerable to really be hurt the hardest. People in the Sahel, in Southern Africa, people in vulnerable kinds of countries who maybe have just gotten above that $2 a day poverty line. They're $3 a day, $4 a day, hardly much money. But climate change really threatens to plummet them back below the line. So that's number one. And then the second is the global retrogression in democracy and in good governance. Because if we are going to, as I spoke about earlier, have societies choose their priorities and have societies meet these challenges, well, you need ways for societies to build the institutions and the systems of governance to be able to tackle those problems. And for all of its faults, democracy seems to be the best way to do that. But with the United States going backwards in its democratic institutions and other countries around the world pushing back against democracy, I do worry about the quality of leadership and governance in developing countries that had gone forward and made a lot of progress over the last 20 years. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been too many countries in which authoritarian leaders have begun to rise and push back against basic human rights. And I worry that that threatens progress. So those are the two big issues that I'm most concerned about going forward.
Oh, Steve, thank you. Thank you for taking this time. We really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation together. As we close, is there a message you'd like to share with our community?
Sure. My big message is to always focus on what can be done and what has been achieved. We have to keep in mind, obviously, the problems that are out there to be solved, but don't take a negative view of those problems, because they can be solved. Human beings, when they work together and learn from each other, have incredible potential to solve some of the world's greatest problems. And we're faced with great problems, but we also have the capability and capacity to solve those problems if we roll up our sleeves and work together. Optimism is not just thinking that something's going to get better. It's having the conviction to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work to see that things go better. And that's one of my key messages for my students and for myself every day, as I try to remain positive in the face of so many challenges that we face.
Oh, Steve, thank you. And again, I'm grateful to you for taking this time to join us today and to share more about your work. Thank you for everything that you do to strengthen our university and to serve our global community.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.